Allen Lund Company, 47 years young and a proud sponsor, wishes OOIDA all the best as you celebrate 50 years.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Scott Thompson.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Come on in, have a seat, and get comfy, because we're going to cover a lot of ground today, starting with all the latest happenings in Washington, D.C. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, why should I care? I've got no control over what they do, and I get that. But we did see some moves in Congress this week that actually have truckers' best interests in mind. We'll break down the biggest stories of the week and add a little color while we do it. Then we'll break down a recent report by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that has some significant implications for trucking, and get into a program in Utah that's designed to teach the general public how to drive safely around big trucks. And finally, in celebration of OOIDA's 50th anniversary, we'll wrap things up by taking a look at another contribution to the trucking industry, courtesy of the association, this one having to do with roadside drug testing, which was a very real possibility at one point. So all of that coming up. But first, the news with Ashley Blackman.
Thanks, Scott. Comments opposing a mandate on side underride guards has been submitted by the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. This week, the association that has more than 150,000 members wrote a letter to the Deputy Administrator for the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, stating that a federal mandate on side underride guards would be impractical and costly, thus outweighing possible safety benefits. The comments talked about operational concerns, lack of reliable data, and lack of real-world testing. In the letter, OOIDA stated that nobody cares about road safety more than truck drivers, and every single truck driver wants to operate in a safe environment. The latest NHTSA analysis indicates that a side underride requirement comes with a roughly $1 billion price tag without even accounting for various operational cost estimates. OOIDA says any move by the agency to advance such a measure is premature and short-sighted. $20.9 million has been announced for 88 projects that will improve road safety on tribal lands. According to the U.S. Department of Transportation, the goal of these projects will reduce roadway fatalities and serious injuries. Some of the projects include pavement markings, rumble strips, and better pedestrian infrastructure. According to the press release, transportation-related injuries and fatalities affect Native American and Alaska Native populations at greater rates than other demographic groups. That's according to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration data. Severe weather conditions have once again prompted Kentucky officials to declare an emergency. In the latest order, issued on July 19th, relief from hours of service is granted for any commercial vehicle providing power restoration and debris removal in the affected areas. Severe thunderstorms, flash flooding, and damaging winds have resulted in considerable damages and economic loss, according to the emergency declaration. Any driver operating under the authority of this order must have a copy of it in the cab of the vehicle. A law that would allow a weight limit of 88,000 pounds for trucks hauling some commodities, including logs and farm products, is a cause for concern among some lawmakers in Georgia. The Associated Press reports that more than 700 bridges across Georgia can't handle the increased weight limits. Deputy Chief Engineer Andrew Heath told the State Transportation Board on Wednesday that the Georgia Department of Transportation and local governments will post signs with weight restrictions on the additional bridges by September 2nd. The previous limit on state roads was 80,000 pounds, but trucks were allowed a variance of up to 84,000 pounds. There are some limits on where these heavier trucks can travel. They can only go on local roads and state highways, not interstates. AP reports that groups seeking the increase said they could save money by hauling more freight per trip, but opponents say heavier trucks will cause more damage to bridges and roads. The Department of Public Safety in Georgia is reminding truck drivers to secure their loads and do pre-trip inspections. Recently, a CMV was stopped with 24 1,000-pound bags of topsoil without any load securement. The Post stated that this kind of negligence could have caused a major disaster on the road. The driver allegedly confessed to not doing a pre-trip inspection before hitting the road. The department says it can't stress enough how important those pre-trip checks are for everyone's safety. A rest area along Interstate 17 in Arizona has reopened. Recently, the Arizona Department of Transportation announced the reopening of the Sunset Point rest area following a year-long $7.5 million renovation project to the site's restrooms, water and septic systems, and other amenities. ADOT says visitors will also notice upgrades to the signage, sidewalks, lighting, and landscape. According to ADOT, the popular rest area serves more than 1 million visitors a year. If you're traveling along I-49, it might not be the time to guzzle down your 40-ounce water bottle or fountain drink. According to numbers from QS Supplies, Interstate 49, which runs from Lafayette, Louisiana to Kansas City, Missouri, ranks as the worst road for bathroom breaks. The average distance between rest areas is approximately 264 miles. The second worst was I-22, and the third was I-72. The chart highlights the realities that many truckers face while behind the wheel, and that's a lack of bathroom access. There is currently a bipartisan bill that would ensure that truck drivers have a place to use the restroom when they are waiting to deliver or pick up freight. The Trucker Bathroom Access Act, which was originally introduced in past congressional session, was formally resubmitted on June 6th. If you're happy and you know it, then drive the speed limit and you'll be met with a smiling emoji in Delaware. The state's Department of Transportation is taking a different approach to let people know how they're doing with emotive radar signs. According to Delaware Online, later this year, signs will be installed that display a happy face or sad face depending on a driver's speed. If you're at or under the limit, you'll be met with a smiling yellow happy face, but if you're speeding, you'll get a red sad face. The signs are reportedly part of a pilot program to address excessive speeding on Delaware's roads. A Canadian man who worked for a fuel supplier in Edmonton, Alberta, is making headlines after he rescued a moose calf and then lost his job. Mark Skage, who worked for AFD Petroleum Inc., told news organizations that he was driving back from a job site when he saw the abandoned calf walking along a British Columbia road. In a Facebook post, he says he observed the moose and a nearby black bear that was stalking the animal. He told CBC News that the moose rode shotgun with him for about 5.5 hours as he went to go get some help. CBC News reports that AFD said Skage's actions breached the company's protocols around interactions with wildlife. They're also disputing his version of events. As for the moose, she is now at a rehab center until she's ready to be released. And finally, an Iowa man won't likely ever find himself in need of a pencil. According to UPI, Aaron Bartholomew has collected nearly 70,000 pencils and is hoping to get the Guinness World Record for the largest collection. The record, as it stands now, is held by a person whose collection of around 24,000 pencils earned him the title in May of 2020. Bartholomew said his collection started when his first grade teacher gave each one of her students a colorful pencil for Christmas, and he soon started swiping other pencils from antique stores and flea markets. Bartholomew said the Guinness World Record officials told him to expect to hear back about whether or not he captured the record in about 3 months. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Ashley. We do our best to cover all the big stories in depth each day here on Landline Now, but sometimes you might want to go back and get more context. The big stories you hear on the show are also covered on landline.media. If it happened in trucking, you'll find it there. From reporting and opinion pieces to pretty much anything in between, check it all out at landline.media. Coming up next, speed limiters, EPA emission rules, and Julie Sue's nomination as Labor Secretary. We got new details on each this week, and we'll cover all the bases in a Landline Roundtable discussion in just a moment. But first, we've got a few bills to pay. Stick around. There's more Landline Now right around the corner.
You trust Prepass for more bypasses? Now let Prepass help with tolls. Prepass toll service means lower cost, one invoice for all tolls, and fewer violations. Created by truckers for truckers. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Attention all truckers, Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I want to talk to you about those dreaded tax problems. I know you want to keep on trucking and not even think about them, but let's face it, they're not going away all on their own. You need professional help. I've been helping truckers put their tax problems in the rearview mirror for years. I can help you too. Call me now for a free consultation at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com. It's like I always say, keep your eyes on the road, I'll keep mine on the IRS. 888-557-4020.
Welcome back to the show. Scott Thompson, joined by the brain trust of Landline Magazine for a little chat about all the latest happenings in Washington, D.C. You may be asking, why should I care? And we get that, but what happens there often has an effect on what you do out there. So here we are taking our medicine, whether we like it or not. Helping us dole out that cough syrup today, Jamie Jones, Tyson Fisher, and Ryan Witkowski of Landline Magazine. The brain trust.
Brain trust.
You guys good with that?
That's nice.
It works.
I like to consider myself the spoonful of sugar to help this
All right.
medicine go down.
Well, we'll depend on you for that here because we are getting into some...
one for one.
We're getting into some, again, not necessarily exciting stuff here, but it is important. You can almost hear eyes glazing over with the mention of the appropriations hearing that happened this past week. It does determine funding for transportation projects over the next fiscal year. But as I said, Jamie, this is important, and it's important that we understand why this is important.
Well, and the thing is, D.C. terminology, congressional terminology, just makes it boring to begin with. Appropriations, you just have no idea. If you're not in it, you don't really know what that is. And it's basically picture Congress as the parent with the purse doling out the allowance for the next year and to the agencies and telling them what they're allowed to spend it on. This is your quarter for your milk today. I mean, that's really what this process kind of is. Yeah. I mean, it's the money, they dole out the money that the agency's allowed to use for the next fiscal year, which runs until September 30th, this one.
Maybe it'd be more interesting if they used the voice. That could make it.
Here's the quarter for your meal.
And a bag of money that they
Here's
actually...
$258 million for truck parking.
Yeah, I like that. One thing, though, that we should mention here is, there is money, at least in theory, dedicated toward things like speed limiters right now. In this appropriations funding bill, there is an amendment that would essentially handcuff FMCSA and not allow them to go ahead with that by taking that money away.
Exactly. They prevent them from spending that money on any speed limiter and speed limiter mandate that they might come up with. And so that is key, because as much as they're handing out the quarter for the milk or the money for whatever else, they can take it away in this same process and block them. So that's why, you hear appropriations hearing and you're like, man, I don't even, I'd rather watch paint dry. But, this is what does make it exciting, is to see things like this go on. And there's, obviously there's other good news that can happen in these appropriations bills. They also put a prohibition on tolls in Oregon and Pennsylvania. Right. And then on the flip side, there's bad news. The under 21 pilot program.
Still there.
Keeping those 4 or 5 kids. How many did they have?
It's going great from what I hear.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that robust pilot program that the ATA keeps pushing that nobody's showing up for, they're doubling down and letting that continue. And so it's just the whole process. This is the funding. There's 12 different bills that they eventually have to get passed. And it's supposed to be before October 1st. Rarely happens. I remember back in the early 2000s, I wrote kind of a similar primer on this. And the last time they had all 12 had been passed before the deadline was in 1994.
Yeah.
I mean, it just almost never happens. And then you have omnibus, which what the heck is that? That's just a giant bill is all that is. Let's use real words.
I think going back to kind of what Jamie had mentioned, though, it is important from the speed limiter proposal standpoint, because we've seen so much opposition towards speed limiters from, across the industry. It's been nearly universal, right? And so despite all of that opposition, though, there still is the possibility that, that's going to come down the pike, regardless of whether or not you say, hey, I don't enjoy this, or I don't support this, or I don't like this. But one way to really slam the brakes on it is say, hey, you don't have any money to pursue it either.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, here's the thing, though, with that, too. As you mentioned, Jamie, this is a process. It did survive this round. Now it goes to the full House, where that speed limiter amendment may survive as well. Probably less likely in the Senate.
We have the whole process that has to happen over in the Senate.
Exactly.
And then they have a conference committee, which that's a fancy term for people from the House and Senate get together and decide what the actual final bill is. There's a lot. But bottom line is we've had a bill a standalone bill.
Yep.
Now it's in appropriations. I know the D.C. team is working their tails off to get one introduced in the Senate.
Yep.
So, I mean, there's a lot of effort on this front, and we are having lawmakers get behind it.
And that is the thing I think to keep in mind here, because we are going to get more information about FMCSA's proposal here in the next month, 2 months. It's going to come pretty soon here. The work really needs to be done now in terms of building up opposition and building up momentum, because once that proposal comes through and we get more information about it, it's like a train in a lot of ways. It keeps on pushing down the road. So the more opposition now, the better, I think, in terms of getting this thing stopped, again, before it picks up all that momentum.
So is that a setup for a shameless plug for fightingfortruckers.com?
Sure,
and,
why not?
Get a hold of your lawmakers and tell them to support the speed limiter legislative language stopping the mandate.
And explain what it would do, not just for, an individual trucker, but for the industry as a whole, the supply chain, traffic, safety, all of those things.
All of it.
I'm ashamed it took us over 6 minutes to get that plug in.
Better late than never, right? So we're seeing pushback, obviously, in Congress with regard to speed limiters. We're also seeing some with regard to EPA's new emission rules for heavy trucks, Tyson. And this effort is bipartisan, which, may surprise some people. We had this letter that went out to the EPA administrator from, I think, more than 30 lawmakers,
Correct.
Right? And they made some points that should sound pretty familiar to everybody, at least listening to this.
Yeah, so this deals with the greenhouse gas emission standards for heavy-duty vehicles, Phase 3. And basically what that does is it would require 25% of new heavy trucks sold in the U.S. to be all electric by 2032. So obviously there's a lot of opposition to this. And as
9 years away.
Yeah.
Nine.
And this is Phase 3, right? Starting with 2028, I think. This is not the Phase 2 with the 2027, right?
Correct.
This is more of the kind of down the road here.
Yes,
is what
exactly.
the opposition is about, right?
Right, and these more than 30 members of Congress, they have actually several points of opposition. The first one is being that it's being rushed. They said that this should be,
That
9
sounds
years.
familiar.
Slow down.
Yeah.
But in this case, they said there should be an advance notice of proposed rulemaking rather than just a notice of proposed rulemaking. So basically, it took the EPA 5 years to finalize Phase 2 of the greenhouse gas rule. This one is a comment period of only 50 days, and there's been the request to have an extension has been denied. So, basically, they're saying they're just trying to streamline this one compared to the other phases.
They're basically saying they're skipping steps here and that they haven't followed all the right steps, and they haven't taken a lot of the concerns that, again, we have brought up time and time again into consideration when making these rules and pushing them forward. The big one that was mentioned in the letter, right, was the concerns about the supply chain and the concerns that there are going to be a lot of individual truck drivers out there that are not going to be able to adapt or pay for all of this new technology, which is a huge concern.
Yeah, no, it's expensive. As the letter points out, an electric truck will cost about $400,000.
Yeah.
So compare that to diesel, which would be up $180,000.
Twice the price. Yeah.
So, it's twice the price. So you got that. But another big point of opposition is the infrastructure, or the charging infrastructure, or the lack thereof. That's a big issue, and it's one that no one has a real answer for. It takes a long time and a lot of money to get that infrastructure set up, something that the Biden administration has been trying to do, but the question is, how long is it going to take? What they're saying is, we don't know how long it's going to take, so why are we rushing this?
Yeah.
Well, and you start putting an electric charging infrastructure in on top of our current electric grid,
Which
that we
already
can't
has
even
problems,
get. Yeah, we can't even get out of a bad winter in Texas without the Kansas City Metro going through rolling blackouts because to share that electricity. So then we're going to plug in a bunch of trucks and cars on top of this. It's just a lot of this just seems so ill thought out. I don't know.
It really does feel like cart before the horse kind of thing, because I think most people out there would agree that this is a good idea to at least strive toward this goal. But again, it feels like we're skipping steps and trying to push it ahead before
we're
really
building
thinking
off technology that doesn't exist.
I don't even know if it's cart before the horse. It feels like cart and horse before the road. Like they haven't even.
How would that work? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Again, this is a bipartisan letter to the EPA. EPA has obviously heard these concerns before, but the fact that it's coming from lawmakers from both the House and the Senate, it's a bipartisan mix. Maybe there will be some, reception there that they actually listen to what these concerns are. We'll see what happens.
They always have an appropriations bill to block a mandate.
There you go. To be continued, perhaps. Finally here, Ryan, we're on the lookout for news about Julie Su's nomination to be Labor Secretary, which I think it's safe to say took a massive hit recently, courtesy of Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia.
It did. We have been, month 3 now? We've been on Sue Watch?
At least.
Something like that.
Yeah,
George O'Connor with our D.C. office is leading the charge on this.
I'm getting there. Okay. I'm getting there. But no,
I think he's got a blog by now.
A little bit of backstory. Sue tabbed by Biden in February to become the new U.S. Labor Secretary. Her confirmation hearing was in April. Still, the nomination hasn't gone to a vote. But you're right. This week, last week, Senator Joe Manchin of Virginia saying in a tweet, quote, "I believe the person leading the U.S. Department of Labor should have the experience and collaboratively lead both labor and industry to forge compromises acceptable to both parties. While her credentials and qualifications are impressive, I have genuine concern that Julie Su's more progressive background prevents her from doing this, and for that reason, I cannot support her nomination to serve as Labor Secretary." Now, in response, the White House saying last week that they basically hoped that he would reconsider his position, also adding that President Biden would continue to fight for Sue's nomination despite all of this opposition, calling Biden's support, quote, unwavering for Julie Su. And much of the opposition, too, as we've noted, throughout the last several months, has been towards Sue stemming from her role as California's labor commissioner, that role basically putting her fingerprints all over AB 5 and
That's kind. That's putting it kind.
Something that, let's face it, like you can't really do anything to mitigate that, short of, inventing a flux capacitor and going back in time. So, there's not a lot that Julie Su can do to that. OOIDA sending a letter in opposition to Biden, last month, saying, quote, "We believe the time has come to select a new nominee whose record demonstrates not only a commitment to improving working conditions for employee drivers, but also an appreciation for the benefits independent contractor status has provided owner-operators over many decades." So it continues to have this opposition. It seems like the Democratic support for Sue is now starting to drop off as well, which is really starting to put into question whether or not she will even have the votes, if it did go to vote, to have that nomination confirmed. So as Jamie mentioned, our D.C. office has been on Julie Su watch constantly. George is just waiting with anticipation. It's like Panda Watch. We're going to be there for you when news breaks.
They've got a bulletin board with the red yarn from pin to pin and all that.
I assume he just wakes up in the morning on a mission, and that is his whole mission.
Well, here's the thing, and we've got to close it out here, but here's the thing to keep an eye out for, too, in terms of Julie Su. She is the acting labor commissioner right now. She could conceivably, her nomination be pulled quietly under the radar on a Friday at 5 p.m., and she could continue serving in that acting capacity for
ever. I mean, we saw it happen at FMCSA.
And it's an election year next year, so take that into account for what it is worth. Jamie, Ryan, Tyson, always good to see you. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time as well.
I'll see you then.
I'm looking forward to it.
You can check out their work at landline.media. Landline Now is back in just a moment.
Firestone tires are for more of everything. More miles for every tire dollar, and more confidence in your fleet. At Firestone, we help fleets save with dependable value. Find your local Firestone dealer today at firestonetire.com/dealer.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truckstop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2023 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Landline Now, welcome back. A recent report by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has some significant implications for the trucking industry. Here to discuss the report and how it applies is OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Jay, thanks for joining me.
Good to be back.
Let's start with this, because I think a lot of people maybe haven't heard about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Can you explain what that agency is and what its function is?
Yeah, it's not one that we deal with a whole lot from a trucking or transportation perspective. And it's a relatively new independent federal agency, a 21st century agency that implements and enforces federal consumer financial law and ensures that markets for consumer financial products are fair, transparent, and competitive. So they have a host of issues that they work on really to protect consumers across all different industries and across the nation.
So tell us a little bit about this report, kind of in a broad sense. What was it that they were studying here?
Yeah, so the agency published a report highlighting the risks employer-driven debt poses to workers. And this is really an effort to protect workers that get involved with what's called these training repayment agreement provisions, which the agency has found can impede worker mobility, particularly when it comes to obtaining higher wages. And the report that was released yesterday really dates back to some information gathering and a public comment period that the CFPB put out last year, about a year ago. And the agency stated, they're charged with monitoring markets for consumer financial products and services to ensure they're fair and transparent and competitive. And as part of that charge, CFPB wanted input from the public on debt obligations incurred by consumers in the context of employment or independent contractor arrangement. And they put out a broad request for information, really looking to find out more about the prevalence, pricing, terms of obligations, disclosures, dispute resolutions, and the servicing and collection of these debts. And certainly that caught our attention with the experience that our association and the trucking industry at large has had in regards to these predatory truck leasing agreements and arrangements. And that request for information really, they wanted to find out a whole lot of information in terms of these practices, and they took public comments from a number of different agencies. They've been reviewing those public comments, and the CFPB has also been doing their own research and fact-finding, and kind of through the combination of all of those efforts have put out this latest report.
I want to go back to one of the terms used in there, training repayment agreement provisions, which conveniently forms the acronym TRAP. I'm wondering if you can explain what that is in layman's terms.
Yeah, these are when companies require workers to agree to pay back costs of training if they leave the job before the end of a contractual commitment period. In some instances, workers may have to agree to debt products where the debt must be repaid if workers leave the employer before a certain date. So kind of going through the fine print of the text, we heard a couple of instances where the carriers try to hide these contractual stipulations through hard to understand language that, a common person entering into these isn't going to understand. Then they try and put in together all these different penalties if a worker wants to leave the agreement. And we've heard and seen examples of this happen within the trucking industry. The CFPB report emphasizes those specifically in the trucking industry, but they also mention a few other industries where these cases are prevalent, and really kind of, I think, does a good job in explaining how unfair these are and really what needs to be done to kind of eliminate these practices. And I think this report can go a long way to establish some oversight and some rulemaking, which CFPB has rulemaking authority to implement.
I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about OOIDA's comments, and you've referred to some of that already, but I'm wondering if you can go into a little bit more detail on the concerns that the association expressed about this issue.
Yeah, our comments were fairly general in nature, and the goal of this last year was to make CFPB aware of what is happening within the trucking industry, and we noted that these predatory truck leasing schemes are one of many long-standing problems within the industry, and that these unfair leasing agreements merit the greatest attention for CFPB's purposes. And, really explained that under traditional lease agreements can allow truckers to operate as independent small businesses. There are these subset of leasing arrangements that almost always exploit drivers, and these are these lease purchase agreements where carriers or leasing companies really take advantage of drivers who want to enter the industry, want to have an opportunity to gain experience and have an opportunity to at some point buy their own equipment and buy their own truck. And unfortunately, all too often the stipulations and requirements that the individuals who enter these agreements can really never be met. And the carriers and the leasing companies that are using these contracts fully know that, but the individuals oftentimes do not. And, in some of these cases, we see the carriers know how much the driver is going to have to work to meet the monthly payments in the lease. And when they start getting close to these requirements, the carrier will stop dispatching the driver. That's just one instance. So that's really what we wanted to make CFPB made aware of about a year ago when they took public comment. And, in this report, they've kind of really found out a whole lot more about truck leasing schemes. And, I think in reading through this, it kind of falls in line to a lot of the cases that our association has learned about. So I think, on one hand, it's difficult to read about these things, but it's also promising that the CFPB is taking an interest and has found a lot of things that the industry is aware of, but really there hasn't been a whole lot of oversight on since these lease purchase agreements have kind of been common practice.
Okay. Well, Jay, thank you very much for the information and bringing us up to date on this report.
All right.
The ability of four-wheelers to safely share the road with trucks is one of the major issues in truck safety, but often new car drivers receive little to any training in how to do just that. Utah is one state that's decided to do something about that situation, teaching young drivers how to share the road safely with large trucks. I talked with Katie Lindley of the Utah Department of Transportation about the program, how it works, and what they hope the results will be. First of all, for folks who aren't familiar, I'm wondering if you can describe the program.
Yes, of course. So TruckSmart, it's a zero fatality safety program. It was actually created by the Motor Carrier Division here at UDOT, and we offer in-person presentations where we started in the driver's ed classes. So we start with the newest drivers on the road, and we bring a semi-truck to their school, to their driver's ed class, and we give them the opportunity to actually get inside the truck and see from the truck driver's point of view. And we actually park cars in the truck's blind spots, or no zones, as we call them. And we tell the students, okay, do you see the car on your right side? Do you see the car on your left, in front, and behind? And it really kind of is an eye-opener, and it gives them a sense of what the truck drivers talk to them during the presentation, tell them all about driving and their biggest fears and things that they see on the road that we do as passenger car drivers. But we visit a lot of schools. In fact, we gave 632 presentations just last year during the school year. And over 1,600 new teen drivers now know how to drive safely around the big rigs. But the campaign that we're doing, we want to get this message out and educate all Utahns and everyone here how to drive safely around these larger commercial vehicles. So that's our goal.
What's the reaction been so far from the students who are going through the program?
Oh my heck, I love talking with the students. They're amazing because it really is an eye-opener for them, especially climbing up into the truck. I mean, these commercial vehicles are so much bigger than your regular passenger car, not just, with size, but with weight as well. So just to kind of give them that eye-opener of, I'm in this truck and I can't see this car that's right here next to me, it gives them that perspective so they know where they don't want to drive around these bigger trucks. But a lot of them love it. We like to honk the horn and usually scare the rest of the students that are standing in the front of the truck. But we have a good time, but it is also very educational and safety oriented. And it's a good plug for the trucking industry too. They love to get the word out and help us. They volunteer their time and their truck with the driver. So it's actually them losing out on money because their truck is not moving. It's not dropping off. It's not delivering any goods, services. So they're really wonderful to help us out.
What's the reaction been from them?
They do love it. I mean, it's a great way for them to kind of to just explain to the students exactly what they see and what not to do, and just giving them, because we have safety tips, and we like to give them these tips that are easy to remember so they can be safe on the roads next to them, because we have to share the road with these trucks. We have more commercial trucks on our roads than any other state. So nearly 25%, one out of every vehicle on Utah's highways is a large commercial vehicle. So we have to share the road safely with them. And so we want to stress out that it's important to learn how to be safe around sharing the road with these trucks, because in these crashes, 75% of the time, it's the passenger car driver that's causing the crash. So it's important to know how to be safe and drive safely around them.
Is that why you focused on the car drivers? So many of these programs, it seems, focus on the truck, but you've chosen to focus on the car driver. Is that the reason behind that, or is there more to it than that?
Yes. Well, I mean, where we have almost double the amount of truck traffic here on our roads, we want to make sure that we're sharing the road safely, but also because we, as passenger car drivers, are the ones that are causing the crash 75% of the time, then these crashes can be prevented if we just learn how to drive truck smart.
Okay. Now, outside of the visit to the schools with the trucks, what other things are you doing to try and get the word out?
Oh, so our summer campaign, we have billboards up across the state. We have ads on Spotify and Pandora. We're trying to reach everyone, even the commercial drivers. I mean, some commercial drivers, they have to be professional. They have to get that CDL to drive these big rigs, and there's a lot of training they have to go through. So, but even then, I mean, it's good reminders for everyone, every driver.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, or anything I didn't ask about that I should have?
Well, we have some Truck Smart safety tips. So our campaign messages, one big one is, if you can't see the driver's face in the side mirrors, then they can't see you, that you're in one of those no zones, in one of those blind spots. And they're on all four sides of the truck and trailer. It can extend 20 feet in front of the truck, 200 feet behind the truck. The right side no zone, though, is the biggest, and it can extend 3 lanes of traffic over. So you really don't want to hang out on that right side. And even along the left side, next to the passenger car or the driver's side door of the semi-truck, that's where the left side no zone is too. But my favorite tip is the 2 lights in the mirror before you merge over in front of the truck. It's easy to remember when you're driving down the road. If you're going to get in front of a semi-truck, if you're going to change lanes and move in front in the same lane as a semi-truck, you want to look in your rearview mirror before you merge. And once you see the whole front of the truck or both headlights in your rearview mirror, then you know you have enough space to merge in front of them or change lanes in front of the truck, and you're not cutting them off, because cutting off a truck can be deadly. And it can be expensive. It's illegal. You can get a ticket for it.
Okay. Well, Katie, that's all I've got. Thank you very much for your time.
No problem, Mark. Thank you so much for getting the word out and sharing this message with everyone. I really appreciate it, and thank you.
Katie Lindley of the Utah Department of Transportation talking about the state's Truck Smart program to teach young car drivers about sharing the road safely with trucks. The Utah Department of Transportation has set up a special webpage for the program where you can learn more about what they're doing. That's at trucksmart.udot.utah.gov. We'll have that on our website, landlinenow.com. Just click on the photo or the headline in the red box. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Forgetness, accuracy, weigh your truck on a CAT scale.
When you weigh on a CAT scale, you get a no excuses guarantee. You can now save time weighing by using your smartphone. Find out more at weightmytruck.com.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount. Landline Now. Welcome back. It's time for another of our 50 on 50. 50 significant events from OOIDA's history in celebration of the association's 50th anniversary.
Many years ago, an attempt was made to start roadside testing for drug use by truckers, and it didn't last long, thanks in part to OOIDA. Here to discuss what happened is OOIDA's historian, Sandy Sonker. Sandy, thanks for joining me.
Hi.
How did this start? What was the kind of opening round of all of this?
Now, you have asked me a question that I could riff on here for a couple hours because it was one of my favorite topics, is how we got involved. I mean, how did truckers even get a target painted on their back in the first place? And it started out so many years ago with the U.S. DOT when the Reagan said, just say no. And they said, oh, by God, we are going to stop the drug use in this nation. Okay, well, then there were millions of safety-sensitive workers that were required to be drug tested. That was the plan. 6.6 million of them being truck drivers. OOIDA immediately filed for an injunction, and guess what? We got that injunction, and it held off for 2 years. But after 2 years, of course, the government totally intended to make this the law of the land. And so when they did, there was an omnibus bill that called for a 4-state pilot program, where we're going to have truckers, we're going to pull them over and have them pee in a cup.
Right there in front of God and everyone.
The most outrageous, insulting thing that could have been done to a professional trucker. And so our members, our leadership, our legal counsel said, that's not going to happen. Now, something that really kicked it off, and let me tell this story because it's a woman that you and I both know, and that was Ruth Jones. She was a driver for All Freight Systems, and it was in 1992 that she was a company driver, and she was on the eastbound scales at North Platte, Nebraska, Nebraska being one of the 4 states, along with Utah, Minnesota, and New Jersey. They were going to do this drug and alcohol test without suspecting another crime. So they climbed up on Ruth's step and then told her, get your driver's license, sister, and get your registration and your logbook. We're going to do a Class 4 inspection. And she says, what? You know, what's involved with that? And that includes submitting to a urine test for drugs and alcohol right here on the spot. Ruth said her husband, he is a trucker too, and a member, had told her that sooner or later this is going to be happening and is so obviously unconstitutional. Well, she was like shocked that it was happening to her. She hadn't done anything. She hadn't done anything to make people think she was drunk or on drugs, but she was it. So she said, after she was scared to death, refusing might take her to jail, she said, I'm not going to roll over for this. I'm not going to play dead. I'm not doing it. Well, after her knees stopped shaking, she got mad, really, really mad. And she came to Grain Valley to OOIDA's office to talk to Todd about it. And I remember when she came. It was, she wasn't sure she'd be accepted as a owner-operator or a member or what, but she was received, you know, with the utmost warmth and assured that, hey, we're going to support you. We'll go. She became a member the same day. So, you know, she goes to see prosecutors and whatever. We, after a lot of work, the charges were dismissed on her. But the association became a driving force in Ruth's life, and she was a plaintiff in our case. And we sued the government over this incredibly outrageous and unconstitutional stuff. Peeing in a cup right in front, witnessed by an officer. So that's that's kind of how that started, and it's Ruth later became an employee of ours, and love her to death. She passed away of cancer, but she really, really was a driving force. And I think there were only a dozen or so truck drivers in the U.S. that refused, but they were all totally outraged. And we filed for this injunction for this 4-state program, but we didn't get the injunction. But it didn't make really any difference because we had a reputation for never quitting. And we told them, we're going to come back. We'll never stop. This will not be a program that the U.S. inflicts on truck drivers. And so just a few months later, that program went away. Now later, of course, the Omnibus Bill in 1991 put in drug testing, but random drug testing wasn't in that.
And not at Roadside.
So I remember Todd Spencer saying something like, if OOIDA and its outraged members and its excellent legal team had not just totally thrown itself in front of the tracks on this, it's likely that truckers would still be pulled over on the side of the road and asked to pee in a cup.
Amazing.
It was amazing.
Well, and since then, OOIDA, and I think we had talked about this a little bit before going on the air, that OOIDA has a drug testing consortium, but the reason for that is...
Well, of course, we objected so much, and after it became the law of the land, what were owner-operators going to do? I mean, if you were going to have a random test and we were going to draw a name like every month out of our group of truckers, all the Swift drivers, well, there's a chance that how often would you have your name drawn if you were working for a big company? If you ran your own company, who are you going to draw every time to be drug tested? It was going to be you. So OOIDA said, well, let's see what we can do about eliminating this hassle. And they started a consortium where you could join as a member and you would be part of that, your name be in the fishbowl with a whole lot of other names. And it has worked out so well for owner-operators, independent, one man, one truck, one woman, one truck.
But it also guarantees fairness.
Fairness, yes. And the price. I mean, when this first started, we understood some other organizations were going to jump on this and capitalize, make a whole lot of money. No wonder they didn't object to it too much.
Okay. Well, Sandy, thank you very much for all the information. We certainly appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
That was another of our 50 on 50. 50 significant events from OOIDA's history in celebration of the association's 50th anniversary. We'll bring you a new entry every week from now until the actual anniversary celebration.
Our program is produced by the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association, the only national organization representing the interest of professional truckers in Washington, D.C., in state legislatures, and with the regulatory agencies that deal with transportation and highway safety. If you're not a member yet, call our main number during business hours to join today. The number is 816-229-5791. You can join or renew your membership for 2 years for $50, a $40 discount. That's our program for today. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow with more. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm. I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome, and I am a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers.
We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us! Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.